Welcome to the podcast Beer and People from Beerstory Brewhouse. Beerstories is normally a YouTube channel with tips, guides, and how-to videos for homebrewing, but I also do interviews with exciting people in the beer industry, and these are very suited for the podcast format, and you'll find them all right here. I want to talk to you a little bit about Untappd, and I'm not saying that I'm using Untappd the right way, but I'm just saying, hear me out, what I've been thinking about. I've got 5 points that 5 topics I want to talk about regarding Untappd. And then I have some tips in the end to actually make the use of Untappd a little bit more objective. I want to reflect a little bit about how I use Untappd and also Rate Beer and other Beer Advocate and all other rating websites or app for beer. And it was actually because I had a couple of beers where, this is an Adam beer, barrel aged in bourbon barrels. It's one of the best barrel aged beers I've ever had. And the rating is just about 4 on Untappd. And that isn't good enough. I've had way worse beer than this with way higher ratings. But of course, 4 is not bad. But this is just the perfect beer for me. So I was a little bit disappointed in my fellow Untappers, if you can say that. And I have more examples of this because the winners of Danish Beer Blog Awards in Denmark 2023 was where is it? It's here. Both the brewery was Observatoriet, and their beer is called their winning beer. They also won for best brewery and for best beer in 2023. And the beer is called Oberon. It's a wild ale. I haven't actually tasted it, but I went into Untappd just to check out what the rating was. Remember, this is the best beer in Denmark in 2023. It's rated at 3.9. And that just isn't fair. The best beer in Denmark being rated there. I get it. The brewer from Observatoriet, he doesn't like Untappd very much because he's making wild ale, and he often sees people comment, "I don't like this beer, it's sour." Yeah, of course it's sour. It's supposed to be sour. So, if you don't like a style, should you rate it? I'm not sure. Yeah. But of course, because I use Untappd to keep track on which beer I've tried. Of course, which beer I liked. But mostly just which beer I've had. But sometimes I also use it when buying beer. I'll get to that later. But for Oberon, the best beer in Denmark 2023, that's not good enough. And I've got more examples. This is a Goese. A Goese is a German ale with lots of salt, and it's sour. And the rating is 3.5 for this one. And that's I don't know. For the style, I think it's okay, but I got a funny one here because there was a guy here, he rated it at 0.25, so 0.25. And what he wrote was just salt and lemon, a tequila shot without tequila. And he actually nailed the flavor 100%. This is what it's supposed to taste like. So if he got that, he's totally correct. But then he rated it at 0.25. with that description he made, he should have rated it at 4. And I'll get back to why that is. Yeah, so a beer like this, in Denmark anyway, won't ever get where it should be. If you look at Hill Farmstead and his saisons or whatever, they are rated top of the world. And yeah, Observatoriet, I'm not sure if they're in the same league, but they actually brewed a couple of beers that are in that league. He is so talented at Observatoriet. He's one of the best in Europe at what he does. So is it fair his beers are rated down there? I don't think so, but yeah. So what I do actually is I use the beer style guidelines, and I know that not all beers fit into a style, but and not all beers should fit into a style. But this is why we actually have style guides, so that we can say, oh, this beer is to style, or this beer is out of style, but that's okay, or whatever. So I'm pro style guide. There's actually a video coming about that later. But what you can see here is actually, okay, let's take Goese. You can actually see it's aromatic limited quality. It should be salty and perceived as light, clean sea breeze. It's a perfect style example. So you can't rate this below 4. Let me show you. Here is the points, as this is BJCP's style guide and their judging sheet. It's almost the same as in Danish, and I've learned to use this on the Danish beer judge class course. So if a beer is excellent to style, you should rate it at about 4. Exemplifies style well, requires minor fine tuning. That's about 3.8. If it's up around 4.0, it's flawless. It might not be the best example or the best style of Goese, but this has no faults, so it should be rated at a 4. The average is 3.5 on Untappd, and it should be rated at least a 4. And I actually quite like it, so maybe I should give it higher than 4. So that's how I rate my beers, and I've linked to both this sheet and everything down in the description. And yeah, this is my way to being a little bit objective, because ratings from going from 0 up to 3 point, up to somewhere in the 3s, that's objective judgment or ratings. So when we get close to 4 and between 4 and 5, that's where I can get subjective and come and my taste, my personal preference is going to take over my rating. But if a beer, I can show you something else. I can show you a Guinness, because Guinness, that beer is generally rated at 3.7. It's actually not a bad rating, but this is the beer that actually defines the Irish Stout. As you can see here, according to Guinness, blah, blah, blah. And if we go down to commercial examples, we have Guinness Dry Stout right there. And Guinness, it has no flaws. It is a style guide example. It's actually where the style guide is defined from that beer. So you can't rate a Guinness lower than 4. It's not fair, because it's a perfect style example. Even though you don't like it. Yeah, so that was my thought about how I rate beer. I'm I also got another example here. This is one of my beer blogger friends. He made a blog post on danishbeerbloggers.dk about his love and hate relationship to Untappd. You can find him on Instagram as well. His name is, or his Insta name is HopSkulls Beer Guide. I'll link to this down below as well. You can translate it through Google if you want. But there's a great example here. A guy rated a New England IPA. And the first thing, he rated at 0.25. The first thing he writes, I'm not going to drink the rest. I hate IPAs, but hope the fruit will come through. It didn't. Probably not helped by the fact that it sat on top of a fridge for 2 years. No, that didn't help at all. That beer was totally ruined. IPAs, after, if it's kept cold at all times, I would say 3 to 6 weeks is where it starts to not go bad, be more boring, and then it starts to go bad. So this rating doesn't help. It doesn't help him. It doesn't help the brewery. It doesn't help the beer. It doesn't help anybody. He shouldn't have made that rating. You can actually just scan the beer and then don't give it a rating, and it won't affect the average if you keep it on 0. There's nothing called 0, but yeah, but you get my point. And then he could have written in the comment, oh, this was too old and blah, 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 I didn't like it. That's fine. Just don't rate it. If you don't like a Goese, don't rate it. Just keep it on 0 and then write your comment, oh, I didn't like this style. So if he scans it again, he can see, oh, I had this beer, I didn't like it. Yeah. So that was my thoughts about a fair rating. Another example is Pilsners from Europe, from Germany, where the best Pilsners in the world are brewed. None of them have a rating above 4. And there are a lot of breweries in the US that have Pilsners above 4. I think the highest rated is Poetica from Hill Farmstead, rated at 4.25. But other than that, German and Czech Pilsners that define the style, that made the style, that brew it to perfection the last Weinstefaner for 1,000 years, they're rated below 4. That's not fair. They brew it flawless and perfect to style. It should at least be at 4 and above. Yeah. Yeah, so just try to be a little bit more objective. Use a style beer guide to learn a little bit about the styles and what they actually should taste like. And don't rate a beer if it's bad, like this guy. A beer should be fresh when you rate it, because that's only what's fair to the brewery and the brewer. And if you're not sure if the shop where you got it, if they have stored it warm, it can actually be bad after 3 weeks. So know your store, know how they treat their beer, how they keep their beer, how they store their beer. Yeah, and check out the date on the can, especially for hobby beers. If it's a beer like this one, I wouldn't be afraid, but because this is a 11.5% Adam beer. It's a dark lager, kind of a barley wine, but just as German style. Yeah. So and it's barrel aged, so I wouldn't worry about that. But a hobby beer like this one or this one, if they weren't fresh, I wouldn't buy them. If it was cheap, I would buy it, but I wouldn't rate it. They have to be within 3 weeks. even if they're stored cold. Yeah, so yeah, don't rate beers that are bad, that have gone bad, because it's not fair to the brewery. And actually, HopSkulls Beer Guide, he has a great example of that too. He was at MBCC, Mikkeler's Beer Festival in Denmark, where he tasted a hazy IPA from Omnipollo right out of the canning line. They canned it the day before, and it was a little green. So at the beer festival, that was the first time it hit the market. It didn't hit the market actually. It was the first time it was served to other people. And it had a pretty low rating because it was kind of green. So sometimes an IPA, when it's canned, it has to rest for 2 weeks just to let the hops settle out and become rounder and yeah. And that actually meant that beer didn't came to Denmark. It wasn't imported to Denmark because it already had bad Untappd ratings. So those who import the beer, they didn't want to import it because it was not a good beer. But HopSkulls actually tracked it down and tasted it like 6 weeks later, and then it was perfect. And he rated it really high himself. But that's an example of how bad ratings and bad timing can actually do harm to the beer market and to the brewery. And that's a problem. It's a problem because ratings can affect what you actually can buy. It affects the brewery, and maybe it's not fair. Danish breweries, beers like this one and this one, if they were made the same beer, if you just put a label on from the US, it would have a rating 1 point higher. If you put a European label on, it would probably have a rating about 0.5 higher. But Danish people rate their beers very, very conservative, I think that's the right word. They're kind of waiting for the one beer that should be at 5 points. Maybe it would never come if you wait for it all the time. These two I've rated 5. Is it the best beers I've ever had? No, it's not. I've had a lot of beers that are rated at 5, but it's right up there. Great beer experiences, great beer, great brewery. Yeah, perfect. Of course, I would give them 5. This one was actually better than this one. Yeah, even though this is a really, really hyped beer. So think about that when you rate your beer. Yeah. Should you be buying beer out of ratings? I don't know. Should you? I do it sometimes. If I'm at my local beer shop, my bottle shop, and I have 2 beers from like let's say Monkish or Root and Branch, I only look at Untappd when I have both in my hand and say which one should I buy, this one or this one. Then I check out the ratings and see which one other people like. But I might miss out on a good beer if I took a Root Branch, which I rated very high, and then compared it to this one. And this beer is just as good. If I were only looking at the ratings, I wouldn't buy this one because it doesn't have that good a rating. But trust me, it is fantastic. I can actually check out the rating here. It wasn't that high. Yeah, just below 4. And I gave it a 5. I don't get it. So yeah, I do use Untappd when I buy beer, but I'm not buying just out of the rating. I buy new beers both because of hype. This Verdant Putty is a really hype beer, so I buy this only from the hype. I have a lot of Instagram beer bloggers that I follow to get inspiration. But I also just sometimes go into a bottle shop and ask what's new, what's good. And sometimes I just try things as well. So yeah, I haven't got the right answer to that. I'm pro-con actually. But ratings really impact breweries. This is a Danish brewery. I think it's one of the best in Denmark. They are starting to have success in Sweden, but it has taken a long time. And the ratings, and I get it. If I were to import beers to sell in my country, and I saw the ratings were lower than many other beers that are already in my country, I'm not sure if I was going to import it. But this beer is fan-freaking-tastic. So I will be missing out. And I think for Danish breweries, it kind of holds them down. They don't get the recognition that they deserve. Like when I talked about Observatoriet before, fantastic brewery, even for European and even for US standards. But they don't get any recognition for that. So, yeah. I've linked down the description to the guidelines and to the score sheet, and also to the blog from HopSkulls Beer Guide. You can get Google to translate it, so you can actually read what he's saying. I think it's a really good post. And I'm not saying my way of thinking about Untappd is the right way. All I hope is that I just make you reflect a little bit about how you use Untappd, or Beer Advocate, or Rate Beer, or whatever, and maybe just discuss it with your beer friends or whatever, just so we reflect on how we actually do this, so we also can help the breweries and actually maybe make some more precise, accurate ratings. I guess that was all I had to say. Happy beer hunting out there. Thanks for listening to the podcast Beer and People from Beerstories. Visit my YouTube channel Beerstories for how-to videos for homebrewing, tips, tricks, guides, interviews, and much more. You can also follow my blog on Instagram or Facebook, or visit my website beerstories.dk.